The obsidian floor of the Grand Council chamber stretched endlessly, its polished surface reflecting the nervous rustling of dozens of species from across the galaxy. Grand Admiral Valak Thorn stood at his command post, for eyes scanning the emergency readouts while his lower pair of arms adjusted the ceremonial collar marking his rank. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for centuries. Fragile, yes, but peace nonetheless. Urgent priority transmission incoming, Admiral, announced the crystalline voice of the station's AI. Thorn's quartet of eyes locked onto the holographic display materializing before him. Unidentified vessels approaching outer perimeter, announced Security Chief Dravak, his scaly hide rippling with agitation. Configuration unknown. Species unknown. Counselor Plex slithered forward, his segmented body curling anxiously. Unknown? That's impossible. Every species within the Galactic Council's sphere of influence has been catalogued. Thorn raised one of his upper arms, silencing the chamber. Show me. The hologram expanded, revealing 3 blocky, utilitarian ships that looked more like industrial equipment than vessels of diplomacy or war. But it was their hulls that drew gasps from the assembled delegates, streaked with thick, viscous fluid that could only be one thing. Those markings, Diplomat Zur whispered, transparent skin paling. That's Krull blood. Impossible. The Krull Empire had earned its reputation as one of the most fearsome warrior species in the galaxy. Their ships were living organisms, their weapons biological in nature, and their blood a corrosive acid that ate through most known materials. To see it coating these strange vessels was unprecedented. Analysis confirms the identification, Security Chief Dravak reported. Krull blood, recently deposited. At least 17 different ship signatures. Plex reared back in horror. They've attacked the Krull? Are these ships trophies? No, Thorn said slowly, processing the implications. If these were trophies, they'd be Krull ships. These are something else entirely. The chamber erupted in panicked chittering, roaring, and various other sounds of distress across the evolutionary spectrum. The Krull blood wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration that the galaxy as they knew it had fundamentally changed. Incoming transmission, the AI announced. Audio only. A clear, measured voice filled the chamber, speaking in the common galactic tongue with a slight accent that no translator could immediately place. This is Ambassador Johanna Maxwell of the Human Confederacy. We come in peace, seeking recognition and membership in the Galactic Council. We request permission to dock. The word peace hung in the air like a contradiction, given the evidence smeared across their hulls. Are they serious? Plex hissed. Thorn pulled himself to his full 3-meter height. Permission granted. Dock at Bay 744. Security, full complement, but weapons locked. We'll hear what they have to say before making any decisions. Captain Rebecca Quinn stepped out of the airlock first, her boots making solid contact with the station's deck. Behind her followed Ambassador Johanna Maxwell and Dr. Trevor Washington, both adjusting to the station's gravity. Quinn's sharp eyes immediately cataloged defensive positions and potential threats while Maxwell's diplomatic smile remained fixed. Welcome to Gateway Station, Thorn announced formally. I am Grand Admiral Valak Thorn. I believe explanations are in order. Maxwell stepped forward, her dark hair pulled back efficiently. Thank you for granting us audience, Admiral. I'm aware our arrival has caused concern. Your ships bear the marks of battle with the Krull. Plex interrupted, unable to contain himself. The Krull Empire has maintained its dominance for millennia. No species matches them in single combat. Quinn's lips quirked. Well, I guess we're the exception. Captain, Maxwell warned softly before turning back to the Council. 6 months ago, a Krull expeditionary fleet attacked our outer colonies. We had no warning, no provocation. They decimated 3 settlements before we could mount a defense. Dr. Washington stepped forward with his tablet. The attack killed 2.3 million civilians. Our military wasn't prepared for biological warfare on that scale. And yet here you stand, Zur observed, studying them closely through transparent skin. with their blood on your ships. We defended ourselves, Quinn stated plainly. They hit us with everything they had. We hit back harder. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Crawl had launched what they surely believed would be a one-sided slaughter, only to encounter something they'd never expected, a species capable of not just resisting, but decimating their forces. How many Crawl ships were destroyed? Thorne asked carefully. 87% of their expeditionary fleet, Quinn replied without hesitation. We've since negotiated a ceasefire with their civilian government. The military caste was reduced in negotiations. Plex's multifaceted eyes widened. You negotiated with the Crawl? War is expensive, Dr. Washington explained clinically. Once we demonstrated our capability, they were willing to discuss terms. Their civilian leadership was quite reasonable when presented with evidence that we could defend ourselves. But to defeat the Crawl Empire, Diplomat Zer trailed off. We're not conquerors, Maxwell insisted. We're survivors. We request a seat on this council not as supplicants, but as equals. We understand your reservations, but we've proven we can defend not just ourselves, but others as well. Thorne considered this. The humans had shown both capacity for violence and restraint. They hadn't exterminated the Crawl, despite clearly having the power to do so. Instead, they'd forced a negotiation. It was pragmatic. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Maxwell's smile widened. Full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities. We're willing to submit to reasonable observation and verification protocols. We're also prepared to offer defensive support to council members facing external threats. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some species saw opportunity in allying with such power. Others, like Plex, saw only danger in admitting a species capable of crushing one of the galaxy's apex predators. The debate raged for hours, with Thorne maintaining order while allowing all voices to be heard. Finally, he called for recess, needing time to process all he'd learned. In his private chamber, Thorne stared at the blood-streaked human ships through his window. Their utilitarian design spoke of a species focused on function over form, on survival over aesthetics. The blood wasn't a trophy, it was evidence of necessity. A chime announced a visitor. Enter. Security Chief Dravak stepped inside. Admiral, I've been analyzing the battle data the humans provided. Their tactics are unusual but effective. They focus on boarding actions and hand-to-hand combat. Against the Crawl's biological weapons, this proves surprisingly effective. Go on. They've also shared preliminary scans of their territory. They've already fortified their borders and established early warning systems. They're not expansionist, they're defensive. Thorne nodded slowly. And if we deny them membership, they'll continue expanding their defensive perimeter, likely coming into conflict with other species. Better to have them as allies than enemies. The Admiral's 4 eyes met the security chief's gaze. Your recommendation? Accept them, but with conditions. A probationary period. Joint maneuvers to assess compatibility. Technology sharing limits. 2 hours later, the council reconvened. Thorne had spent the time communicating with various faction leaders, building consensus. The fear was still there. Fear of human capability. But it was balanced by growing understanding that they had already demonstrated restraint when given the opportunity to annihilate an enemy. Before we proceed, Thorne announced, I have additional information that may influence our decision. The hologram displayed tactical data from the human combat recordings. The violence was shocking. Humans boarding Crawl ships, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat. But it was the aftermath that caught everyone's attention. Captured Crawl warriors were seen receiving medical treatment. Human medics were treating alien wounds with the same care they'd give their own species. They didn't have to save the survivors, Zer whispered. We have rules, Captain Quinn spoke up. Laws of war. Honor codes. Just because we can kill doesn't mean we should once the fighting stops. The chamber was quiet as delegates processed this new information. These weren't mindless killers. They were warriors with principles. I believe, Thorne said carefully, that we should put this to a vote. The question before us is not whether humanity is powerful. Their ships bear bloody testament to that. The question is whether they belong among us, sharing our burdens and our protections. The voting began, species by species. Some votes came quickly, others required debate among their own kind. Thorne watched Admiral Maxwell maintain her composure despite the tension, occasionally whispering to her colleagues, but never showing fear or impatience. Finally, the results were tallied. The chamber held its breath. By a margin of 64 to 36%, with abstentions noted, the Council votes to grant humanity provisional membership status, subject to review in 2 standard galactic years. The human delegation remained composed despite what must have been relief. Maxwell stepped forward. "Thank you for this opportunity. We understand the weight of your trust and will endeavor to prove worthy of it. There will be conditions," Plex interjected, though his tone was more resigned than hostile. "Technology sharing restrictions, joint training exercises, regular inspections. We welcome transparency," Dr. Washington responded. "We're scientists as much as warriors. We believe knowledge shared strengthens all." Over the following weeks, integration protocols were established. The humans proved as good as their word. Their defensive capabilities were indeed formidable, but they adhered to Council regulations scrupulously. The observation team sent to human space returned with glowing reports of peaceful cities, advanced infrastructure, and a complex democratic system. But it was a seemingly minor incident that truly shifted perceptions. 3 months after their admission, a distress call echoed through Council space. Ambassador Zer's observation team, mapping an asteroid field in the frontier regions, had been ambushed by Krull remnants, rogue elements seeking revenge on the Council for accepting humanity. The closest Council response ships were days away. The human fleet was mere hours distant. "This isn't our sector," Captain Quinn analyzed quickly. "We have no obligation to respond." "They're our colleagues now," Maxwell countered. "Council members. We protect our own." Quinn grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Engineering. Prepare for emergency transition. Combat teams. Prep for boarding procedures. We're going hunting." The human response was swift and decisive. Their ships materialized at the edge of the asteroid field, immediately engaging the Krull raiders. But it was their tactics that amazed the Council observers. Rather than simply destroying the Krull ships, human strike teams boarded them with surgical precision. They disabled weapons systems, captured enemy vessels intact, and, most surprisingly, began broadcasting demand for surrender in the Krull language. "Stand down," a human soldier commanded over the comm. "We bear you no spite. Surrender and be treated with honor." The Krull warriors, expecting death, were unprepared for mercy. One by one, they threw down their weapons. The human medics were already among them, administering aid before the last shots had even ceased firing. Diplomat Zer, shaken but alive, recorded everything. When his team was safely aboard a human ship, he found himself face to face with Captain Quinn. "You came for us," he said simply. "Of course we did," Quinn replied, as if there had never been another option. "Council protects its own. That's what membership means." The aftermath of the rescue operation reverberated through Council space. The footage of human soldiers, the same warriors who had crushed the Krull expeditionary fleet, carefully tending to enemy wounded and handling prisoners with dignity, spread quickly. Counselor Plex watched the recordings repeatedly in his quarters. The humans he had feared, the warriors with their blood-stained ships, were showing a complexity he hadn't anticipated. They were fierce when threatened, merciful when victorious, and loyal to their allies. When the Council reconvened to discuss the incident, the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Grand Admiral Thorne noted the change immediately. The seat he'd ordered prepared for humanity was no longer separated by a nervous buffer of other species representatives. Other delegates had voluntarily moved closer. "The humans have demonstrated," Thorne announced, "that their strength is matched by their restraint and their tactical prowess by their strategic wisdom. I believe we can consider their probationary status concluded." The vote was unanimous. As the formal integration ceremony concluded, Thorne found himself standing with Ambassador Maxwell on the observation deck, watching her blood-streaked ships, no longer threatening symbols, but honored veterans, dock for repairs. "Your people have surprised us," he admitted. "We feared your strength because we couldn't understand it." Maxwell smiled. "We understand fear. We've faced it often enough. But we've learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. And purpose without strength is just hope. And what is your purpose? Survival. Progress. Protection of those who can't protect themselves." She gestured to the galaxy beyond the window. "This council has maintained peace through balance and diplomacy. We're honored to add our strength to that balance." Thorne considered this. "And if the balance shifts? If others emerge as strong as you? Then we'll adapt," Maxwell replied simply. "And we'll encourage them to choose the same path we did, cooperation over domination." As the human delegation departed for their welcome banquet, Thorne reflected on the day's events. The galaxy was changing, but perhaps change wasn't something to fear. The bloodstained ships now docked at a station weren't harbingers of conquest. They were testament to a species that could defend fiercely, negotiate fairly, and chose allies over enemies when given the choice. The Galactic Council had gained more than a powerful member. It had gained a lesson in the unexpected paths to peace. Months later, as reports filtered in of human defensive fleets working alongside Council forces, deterring aggression across multiple sectors, Thorne sometimes still found himself gazing at those ships. The bloodstains had long since been cleaned away, but their legacy remained, a reminder that strength, properly directed, could protect rather than threaten, could unite rather than divide. And on the bridge of her flagship, Captain Quinn reviewed similar reports with satisfaction. The Council had feared humanity's capacity for violence, never imagining that same capacity could be the foundation for the deepest trust. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and wonders alike. But now, for the first time in its history, the Galactic Council faced its future with a new kind of strength, one earned not through conquest, but through the choice to answer a distress call from strangers who had once feared them. The bloodstained ships had become symbols of protection rather than predation, and the Council chamber, once echoing with fear at humanity's arrival, now regularly rang with the translator's precise rendering of human laughter, sharing jokes with beings they had once seemed destined to fight. Progress, it seemed, sometimes arrived on blood-stained wings, but it was the path chosen after the fighting ceased that determined whether those stains would wash away into infamy or shine as marks of honor. And in private moments, as the human ships patrolled Council space with the same dedication they'd once reserved for defending their own territory, Thorne allowed himself to acknowledge the truth that perhaps others still feared to admit. Sometimes the most dangerous predator made the staunchest guardian, and the species most capable of destruction was the one most committed to protection. The Galactic Council had learned that lesson the day humanity arrived with blood-stained ships, and in learning it, had found not a threat, but a shield, a fierce ally in a galaxy that still held countless mysteries, dangers, and opportunities for those brave enough to face them together. As the station rotated through another cycle, bringing artificial dawn to its corridors, the future stretched out before them, uncertain but somehow less threatening than it had been before that momentous day. The blood might have been washed from humanity's ships, but the respect it had earned remained, a foundation upon which to build not just peace, but partnership. And somewhere in the depths of space, where the Krull Empire still nursed its wounds, their leaders contemplated the reports of humanity's integration into the Council. Some spoke of future revenge. Others, wiser perhaps, recognized that in choosing diplomacy over annihilation, humanity had shown a restraint that marked them as more than mere warriors. They were civilization builders, and the Council had been wise to accept them. The galaxy continued its eternal dance of stars and civilizations, but something fundamental had shifted. Where once each species had stood alone, trusting only in their own strength, now connections were forming. Alliances forged not from weakness, but from mutual recognition of shared purpose. And at the heart of this new paradigm stood humanity, no longer strangers bleeding from fresh battles, but members of a greater whole, their strength a promise rather than a threat, their ships a barrier against the dark between the stars rather than heralds of destruction. The Galactic Council would face many challenges in the centuries to come. Pirates, tyrants, cosmic phenomena, and the endless complexity of maintaining peace among diverse species. But they would face them with humanity's ships in their fleet, human diplomats in their chambers, and human warriors standing ready to defend not just their own, but all who shared their commitment to something larger than any single species. The day humanity had arrived with blood-stained ships would be remembered as the day the Council learned that sometimes salvation wore the face of horror, and protection came clad in the armor of warriors who had learned that true strength lay not in the killing, but in knowing when to spare the fallen foe. And in the end, that knowledge had transformed everything. For when the human ships next sailed into battle alongside their Council allies, their hulls bore not just the marks of conflict, but insignias of unity, symbols that declared to the galaxy that here flew defenders of the peace, guardians of the civilized worlds, allies forged in blood but tempered by wisdom. The blood-stained ships had become simply ships of the line, indistinguishable save for their capability from any other Council vessel. But those who remembered their arrival knew better. They had witnessed transformation, not just of humanity's role in the galaxy, but of the galaxy's understanding of what strength truly meant. And so the Galactic Council sailed forward into an uncertain future, united not by fear or necessity alone, but by choice, the choice to stand together, protected by those who had once inspired terror, defended by warriors who had learned that honor meant more than victory. The stars waited, eternal and patient, for whatever challenges might come. But for the first time in galactic history, they would find not individual species standing alone in the dark, but a united front, with humanity's ships, once marked by blood, now marked by the insignia of hope, sailing among them as equals, as protectors, as friends. And in the Council's archives, the records of that momentous day were preserved, not as a warning, but as a reminder that the greatest changes often arrived unexpectedly, carried on wings of concern and curiosity, to transform fear into strength and isolation into alliance. The day humanity showed up at the Galactic Council with blood-stained ships would forever be remembered as the day everything changed, the day strength learned wisdom, fear gave way to understanding, and the galaxy discovered that sometimes the most threatening appearance concealed the most steadfast friend. For the human race had arrived bearing evidence of violence, but offering a future of peace. They had come as strangers bringing messages of survival, and had become family offering brotherhood. Their ships still bore the capability for destruction, but now flew under the banner of protection. And the blood that had once stained their hulls had washed away, leaving only the polish of honored service, the gleam of shared purpose, and the patina of alliances forged in the crucible of mutual respect. The Galactic Council had evolved that day, had grown beyond its fears to embrace its potential, and in doing so, had written a new chapter in the history of civilized space, one where strength served wisdom, where power protected rather than threatened, and where the arrival of blood-stained ships had heralded not conquest, but the birth of a true galactic community. And as the galaxy turned through its cosmic cycles, that community would face its future's challenges together, protected by ships that bore no blood save that willingly given in defense of others, manned by crews who had learned that greatest strength lay not in the fist that could strike, but in the hand extended in friendship. The humans had shown the way, arriving as terrifying unknowns and departing as honored members, their ships transformed from harbingers of doom to symbols of salvation. And in their wake, they left a galaxy forever changed, one where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where strength was measured not by capacity for destruction, but by willingness to protect. And so the story of the day humanity arrived with blood-stained ships became legend, a tale told across species and systems, a reminder that first impressions, however bloody, need not define final fates. It became a story of transformation, of choosing allies over enemies, of finding courage to trust even when fear whispered warnings. Most importantly, it became a story of hope, proof that even in a galaxy vast and wild, civilization could flourish when strength stood in service of principles, when power bowed to wisdom, and when species once unknown to each other could forge bonds strong enough to face whatever future awaited among the stars. The blood had washed away, but the lesson remained, that strength without purpose was merely destruction, but strength wedded to protection could safeguard not just worlds, but the very concept of peace itself. And as the human ships continued their patrols through Council space, keeping watch over territories that had once seemed to belong to others, but now belonged to all, the species of the Galactic Council slept a little easier, knowing that the very capacity for violence that had once frightened them now stood guard over their dreams. For the humans had arrived bearing the marks of war, but had chosen to serve the cause of peace. And in that choice lay the seed of transformation, not just for humanity, not just for the Council, but for the very nature of power itself in the galactic community. The day would be remembered, as would the ships, as would the choice to trust despite fear, to accept despite uncertainty, to build community despite difference. And in the grand tapestry of galactic history, those blood-stained ships became symbols not of what was feared, but of what was gained: strength in service of protection, power in service of peace, and unity forged from diversity. For when humanity had shown up at the Galactic Council with blood-stained ships, they had brought not war, but the beginning of a new era of cooperation. And in accepting them, the Council had not just gained a powerful ally, but had transcended its own limitations, growing into something greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy continued its eternal dance among the stars, but now it danced with new steps, new rhythms, new harmonies created from the joining of voices once silent to each other. And above it all, human ships sailed serenely among their allies, their hulls clean of old battles, marked instead with the insignia of new purpose, protectors of the peace, guardians of the future, and proof that even the most unlikely first meeting could forge the strongest bonds of friendship. The blood had been washed away, but the memory remained, not of violence, but of the choice to turn violence into virtue, strength into service, and solitude into solidarity. And thus ended the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, written not in blood, but in the ink of mutual understanding, penned by species who had learned that their greatest strength lay not in standing alone, but in standing together. The day humanity arrived with blood-stained ships had changed everything, and in changing, had shown the way to what could be a galaxy united not by necessity alone, but by choice, by shared purpose, by the understanding that even the greatest strength needed direction, and the wisest direction was always toward protection of those who shared the same stars. The future waited, vast and unknowable, but for the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council faced it not as a collection of isolated species, but as a true community, protected, united, and strong not in spite of its differences, but because of them. And among their protectors, sailing with purpose and pride, were the ships of humanity, no longer marked by blood, but by honor, no longer strangers bearing warnings, but family bearing hope.